Chef Dean Neff, and I'm in the heart of downtown Wilmington, North Carolina. We're at my restaurant Pinpoint, and today we're gonna go through making a simple chicken roulade. So when I first met Kyle, he brought some of his chickens in, and I could immediately tell that they were real pasture-raised birds. We had some, in trying to figure out the best way to present this to our guests so that they could appreciate the differences between factory farm birds and pasture-raised birds. All right, and so here we have the deboned chicken that's been brined for 24 hours. You can do 18 to 24 hours. You notice there's still some herbs and some mustard seeds and things like that. So we've also kind of patted the skin dry a little bit and to remove any excess brine. And now we're going to transfer it over to a sheet of plastic wrap that we have. One thing that's really important here is we want to make sure that we're rolling it breast to thigh so that when you slice into it, you're getting a little bit of each. So we don't want to, if you fold it the other way and roll it, you're going to end up with half of it being breast and the other half being thigh and leg only. So this will give you, with each cut, you're going to get a little bit of each. So give yourself a little bit of room towards yourself here on your plastic wrap. Lay this out. And you're going to kind of rearrange everything, make sure everything's in the right place, has fallen into the right place. Just leg meat out like this. And you can kind of see that there's a lot of meat out here, and if we were to pull it out this way, we're kind of missing space here. So if we roll it this way, we're going to end up with a little bit of not enough meat in the middle. So you want to kind of bring the breast and the tenderloins in, and we're going to fold it and roll it this way. So keeping the skin on the breasts, bringing it in, folding it until we end up with this. And you want to tuck it a little bit on the ends, round it out just a little bit. Something else, if you wanted to get, really fun, you could pipe like a force meat or a chicken sausage into the center, and that would really, when you cut into it, it's really beautiful because you can see that sausage in there as well. So got pretty good coverage here, which is what we want with this dish. We think it's kind of fun to fry it because who doesn't love fried chicken? And we're gonna roll this and try to keep as much air out as we can. So by starting to roll it and leaving these open, we can kind of push air down and out the sides. So we roll, and looks like we don't have a whole lot of air in there, which is great. Now you're gonna pinch and kind of pinch towards the center and roll as you do it. So you end up with that. If you roll too much, you can end up with, it can kind of buckle in the middle. You wanna make sure it doesn't buckle. We're gonna fold these under here, and you see we have 2 pieces of butcher's twine. So this is kind of a good technique to learn. Very simple, but you can use it in a lot of different ways. So it's a really helpful thing to learn how to do, from sausage making to terrine making. We're taking this, pinching it, tying it tight, tie it again. Again on this side, same thing. Pinching it, tying it tight. We're going to tie it again. And then this is where this technique becomes really useful, especially if you've noticed that you have a little bit, you want your roulade to be tighter. So what we're going to do is we've left a little bit of room to hold on to the plastic wrap here. We're going to hold on to one piece of string. We're going to take this other piece of string and we're going to wrap it around and roll it down this way. This is called torquing, and by torquing this, we're going to make the roll tighter. And so now that we've gotten, you can see this, we've rolled it down a little bit, we're going to take the other string and we're going to tie it into a double knot again, and that will stay like that as we're cooking it. So we've got the scissors, we'll snip that, do the same thing on this side. Again, holding on to this string, taking the other one and rolling it down. It's It's tightening everything up. It's going to give it a much better shape. When we're poaching this, shape is kind of everything because we get a nice uniform shape, and that means it's going to cook really evenly. So there's nothing, there aren't many different shapes on this one. So we've gotten it to this point. Now we're going to poach it off. There are a couple different, schools of thought when it comes to poaching. Some people will do the same procedure but wrap it in cheesecloth and then poach it in a stock. Because we brine this, I want everything to stay in there. So we're using plastic wrap. We're not going to poke holes in it, and we're just going to poach it in simmering water, or just below a simmer. So we're looking at about 180 degrees, 200 degrees, and we're going to poach it until it reaches an internal temperature of 165 degrees. So we're back, and we have our chicken roulade that we have torqued. We're getting ready to poach it off. We are going to use stovetop, pot, water. You could also use sous vide machine if you wanted to, and cryovac. That would actually be a really good way to do this preparation. You're going to ice it down immediately after. For sous vide, I would go about 175 degrees on the machine, and then I would ice it down quickly once it's reached an internal temperature of 165 degrees. But here we're going to do it on the stovetop. And so now we're over here, we're going to lightly poach this. Again, our temperature of the water is 180 degrees, so very carefully put it in there. If the roulade starts to float a little bit, you're going to want to cap it off. Ours is kind of hanging out midway down, but we'll cap it anyway. It'll keep the heat very consistent. And then once it's finished, once we've reached that internal temperature, we're going to take it out and we're going to go into an ice bath to shock it down and bring it down to a very cold temperature really quickly. All right, now we're going to check the roulade. So be careful going in there. We're going to take it out and we're going to temp it. And we're looking for an internal temperature of 165 degrees. A good way to kind of go and check the temperature is to go in through the end where we tied the knot. If you have to go back in, if it hasn't quite reached 165 at that point, you can easily go back in. So we're going in. We're at 167. So one thing, after it comes out, you'll notice that as it cooks, it can kind of become a little bit misshapen. This is common when you're making pâtés and terrines. You sort of press it when it comes out so that it chills and it kind of comes back into a uniform shape. So it looks nice, and again, we're going to fry this again, so we want it to cook in the uniform way. So kind of the exact same process. We're not going to go through the trouble of tying it, but we are going to roll it and store it with the ends underneath. That's kind of bringing it back to shape. It's going to kind of contain it, and when it cools, it'll cool in a more uniform shape. So here we have the chicken roulade. This has been poached off and chilled. We then sliced it in half and soaked it in buttermilk just for a little bit. You can soak it up for up to a day. We take it out of the buttermilk, and then we're just going into very simple, lightly seasoned flour, and we're going to get ready to fry it. This is cooked all the way through, so really we want to make sure that we're warming it all the way through, but it doesn't take as long to cook because we're not having to cook it to an internal temperature at this point. So there is that. We're going to get our oil heated up. All right, so we're looking for a temperature of about 325. We've got our chicken roulade half that we have soaked in buttermilk, and then we dipped it in a little bit of flour. Very carefully, we're going to lower this in. These can pop sometimes because sometimes the gelatin from the process of cooking it in the bag, you'll get a little bit of gelatin under the skin, so that can kind of cause a little bit of spattering, so be careful when you're doing this. We're just going to roll it in there. And again, if you need the Thermopen thermometer to check the internal temperature, you want to make sure it's warm on the inside. We know it's cooked all the way through, but you want to make sure that it is going to be warm. 325 here at the restaurant, we generally find it takes about 7 minutes to get nice and golden brown on the outside and then warm on the inside. We're about 7 minutes in, and as you can see, we're going to take it out. I want to pull it out when the oil's hot. Then turn your oil off. Put it onto a clean towel that it can drain on. Here at the restaurant, we actually slice this, but it's really important if you are going to slice it to let it rest for about 4 to 5 minutes before cutting it in half. Cut it with a really sharp knife. If you don't have a really sharp knife, use a serrated knife so you can kind of get through the outside without damaging it as you go through. And that's it.